Holy Spirit. Amen.
So, yeah, Saint David. So the story with Saint David is, first of all, we start with Rigi Farch.
Oh, that can only be Welsh.
Yeah, he was a Welsh 11th century biographer. Where we get our information now, he had written the Vitae Davidis, the Life of David, in the 11th century, and he had quoted multiple other sources, which we no longer have access to those sources or know what happened to them. There are a few other sources of information and tradition, but like we were talking earlier about how legends. I think it was Nelson that brought that up with St. Patrick legends that developed. How much is real and how much is exaggeration, how much are just stories that were added in later.
Mm-hmm.
But St. Patrick never really drove out snakes. It's questionable if he ever really used a shamrock to explain the Trinity, maybe. And I think there's some of the same stuff with any of these really older saints before history was well documented. And there's legends grow and things get exaggerated. But we'll still talk about just what are the traditions and legends of Saint David, knowing that some of them may be exaggerations. And who knows, maybe they're not. Saint David, or in Welsh, Dewi Sant, of course, is a patron saint of Wales. And we know he was a monk and became an abbot and eventually became bishop for quite a few years, and eventually Archbishop of Wales. And he was born in 500, or maybe the year 490, or maybe the year 520. But it looks like somewhere around 500 was likely. I also saw 499 one place. Also said he lived to 100 years old. That varies quite a bit too. He lived from 500 to 600. And maybe he lived for 90 years, but all accounts have him living to a ripe old age. And he was a grandson of King of Ceredigion, so a local kingdom in Wales. And according to legend, his mother, who also became a saint later, Saint Nan, gave birth to him on this cliff top during a fierce storm. And there's the ruins there of a chapel to Saint Nan. And actually, that chapel dates back to at least the 7th century, maybe even the 6th, which would be pretty much in his lifetime. There's been various chapels built there and destroyed from the weather over time, but the location has remained pretty reliable back to his lifetime. And tradition has it that he was a vegetarian. He ate bread, herbs, and vegetables, and drank only water, no alcohol, for him or his followers in his monastery when he was an abbot. He had them all following the same rules. Kind of a strict abbot. Because that became known as Aquaticus, or Dewi
Water drinker.
Differ, the water drinker.
Mm-hmm.
One of the legends about him is his self-imposed penance. He would stand in his neck in a lake of cold water reciting scripture.
All right.
Yeah.
You going to tell us this is how you live to be 100?
Yeah.
Maybe so.
No, it only just feels that way.
Reminds me of Saint Benedict. One of the traditions about him is when he would be tempted by sin, he would run out and throw himself into briar bushes.
Oh,
okay.
true.
Self from sinning.
Probably naked.
Yes, actually, I think it's true. Saint
Oh my
Benedict.
gosh.
Ouch.
So I don't know which you'd rather do, stand in a lake of cold water reciting scripture. I'd probably choose that one, but
Is this all because of the rule of celibacy? I mean,
Um,
these poor men.
I don't know. This was the 5th century. I don't think celibacy was universal in the Catholic Church then. And this is before the schism. We were all one church basically, and there was celibacy. It was always present in the Roman Church area, not the Roman Universal Catholic Church, but it wasn't universal until I think like the 8th century when it requiring priests to be celibate.
But a monastery was always celibate.
Was that?
A monastery was always celibate.
Oh, you got a good point. That's a good point. You're right. So, and he was a monk, so he would have been.
Yeah. They didn't get together to play with the nuns.
Or ogle the village
didn't.
girls as they went by to get water or something.
Well, they probably did that.
And then they went and did terrible stuff to punish themselves.
Mm.
Poor things.
So he became Bishop of Wales. So there's the story that seems to be pretty historically reliable. There was a synod of Brevi in 550, and the synod was about the Pelagian heresy that was going on. St. Augustine of Hippo also had a lot to say about this, and so did St. David. So the Pelagian heresy was from a British monk named Pelagius, and he had taught there was no original sin, believing that human tendency to sin is a free choice, which I don't have a problem with that, but he expanded on that to say there's no need for God's intervening grace. These people only need to make up their own mind to do God's will. So he was negating the need for God's grace as a result of his teaching that there was no original sin. So where he went with that became known as a heresy, and eventually the church condemned his teachings. But St. David had done some apparently phenomenal preaching and expounding on this at this convention or the synod in Brevi, and that catapulted him into a higher level. More than just a monk, he ended up becoming a bishop and archbishop. And apparently he was quite a renowned speaker and well loved in the Welsh community. And he did a lot of traveling, established numerous churches. Like St. Patrick, he was responsible for spreading Christianity. Now, Christianity was already in Wales, but he spread it much further, became much more pervasive throughout Wales and Cornwall and Brittany. So all over South and West England. Credited with founding 12 monasteries, including Glastonbury and one at the city that was formerly called Menevia during his town, but is now called St. David's. And that became the bishop's seat for himself. A small monastery called Glen Rosen or Rosevale, which eventually became the current monastery. The site of that site became the monastery. And became the cathedral that stands there now, actually. So there are numerous legends associated with St. David. One is a legend during this battle against Saxon invaders, and the Welsh soldiers, that typo, unable to distinguish friend from foe because the uniforms were basically identical. And he was a monk at the time. He pulled a leek out of the ground and yelled to the soldiers to put the leek in their helmet so that they could identify their comrades by leaks in their helmets. And because of that, they won the battle. And this is the reason why a leek is a national symbol of Wales. It's also the reason why a daffodil is a national symbol of Wales, which doesn't make sense until you see the Welsh words for daffodil and leek are basically the same thing. Senehin or Senehin Pater, which translates as Peter's leek. So if you see people wearing leeks or daffodils in their hat, there's probably some Welsh reference going on there.
Of course, the leaf of the daffodil looks like the green onion.
You know, I guess it does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's that spear-shaped leaf.
Yeah.
Have
Then the
any of your, is anybody's daffodils come up? I've got a
Yes.
bunch that just bloomed this past week.
yeah,
Oh, lovely.
I've seen
Yeah,
some.
Arthur. Yeah.
Are your leeks coming up too?
Well, haven't seen those yet.
Actually, we have 3 perfectly healthy ones that have grown over the winter.
Oh,
I cut off the bottoms of green onions and put them in water, and they started growing, and then
Oh,
I
nice.
planted them in the dirt. So you can actually revitalize a bunch of green onions that you buy at the store by doing that. And
Oh.
the ones that are growing are looking absolutely beautiful now. They're getting really thick and lovely.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, when we were digging up the ground last weekend, we found some onions growing already from last year too. So
Oh, cool.
yeah, we've done the
First
thing
come up.
bottoms and so another legends is about bees. There was this bee. My controls are freezing on me. I do that sometimes. There was this beekeeper. His name was Modamnak, and he was a beekeeper at David's Monastery for making honey and wax. And he needed to return to Ireland, but the bees kept following him to the boat.
oh,
He did this 3 times. He tried to return. The bees kept following him. Saint David blessed the bees and allowed Modamnak to bring them with him. And that is the tradition whereby they say honey bees were introduced to Ireland.
Wonder who did the pollinating before that.
Yeah, I don't know. So St. Patrick drove out the snakes and St. David brought him honey.
Oh,
He also has numerous miracles associated with bringing people back to life or restoring vision. One of his
there he goes.
more unique stories and miracles associated with his life took place in a village of Llandewey Brefi, where this church is. He was preaching to a large crowd at a synod. People had a hard time hearing him. And the story goes that while he was preaching, a white dove landed on his shoulder.
oh.
And as it did, the ground rose up to form a hill, making it possible for everyone to see and hear him. And that standing on that hill.
And then he got stung by a bee.
At least the bee was blessed. So if we go back, anytime you see an icon or a painting of St. David, let me go back to one of those. You'll almost always see a dove.
That's the one you showed us with
Yeah.
the dove on his shoulder.
Right. So that goes back to the story of the hill that little church still stands on. And that church goes back to the 6th century. So
Mm.
of course, the dove is a common symbol in Christianity. So
Holy Spirit.
and so St. David, around 600.
Beautiful.
And tradition teaches that it was at March 1st, so that's St. David, the day we celebrate his feast day. And he was buried at this site where the cathedral is. And his shrine there was a shrine to him with his relics inside of it that became a popular pilgrimage throughout the Middle Ages. His last words to his followers in his last sermon the Sunday before he died was, "Be joyful, keep the faith, and do the little things you have heard and seen me do."
Isn't that nice? Be joyful,
Mhm.
Mhm.
the first thing.
Still apparently a popular maxim in Wales.
And do the little things in life.
Mhm.
So that site right there, there's been a church of some kind there since the time of St. David. The cathedral that's there in the picture was, the building began in 1181, so that would have been the Norman era.
That tower seems to overpower the church structure.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
St. David's shrine with his relics were there until 1547, when, as we know, the Reformation across England, there was a lot of destroying of relic,
Ah,
anything Catholic looking. I know, isn't it unfortunate?
yeah,
Like many things, his relics and his
Oh,
shrine to him were all lost, destroyed.
all those wonderful Buddhas that were blasted by the, what group in Asia?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
The
such a
same
shame.
thing, just destroy.
The
It is.
Taliban.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a real loss. It's a loss.
mm.
But there have been pilgrimages going on there for centuries. In fact, in the 12th century, Pope Calixtus II declared that the shrine was important enough that 2 pilgrimages to St. David's were equal to 1 to Rome, and 3 were equal to a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. I'm not sure how he came up with the math for that. I didn't know there was a mathematical equation for levels of holiness, but and that's a picture to give you an idea of
Where it is.
where they're. Yep, right there on the western coast
Mm-hmm.
of Wales.
Protected by islands, so when the wind and the weather comes in from the Atlantic, it comes in on that coast viciously.
Oh, I bet it does. Have you been there?
Yeah, I've been there. It's a wild place. It's beautiful,
Yeah.
but you stand on the cliff top, you'll be backwards.
There is a pilgrimage walking from I think London area over to St. David's.
wow.
I wouldn't mind doing that someday. It's on my list of things I might do.
Mm-hmm.
Retirement dreams. But I bought walking sticks for Veronica for Christmas so we can practice.
Yeah, very good.
So you need to like eating leeks.
Yeah.
So the St. David's Day celebration is tradition in Wales since the 12th century.
That
And
looks like
A
scone.
scone or an English
interestingly enough, there's this online shop that I have bought at before called the British Corner, and they'll ship you things from England that are
Mm-hmm.
and I, out of curiosity, I ordered some of these along with a bunch of other biscuits. They're actually quite good. Those are currants in there.
Mm.
They're somewhere between they're more like an English biscuit, a little bit like an American biscuit. They're somewhere in between. They're kind of fluffy. They're quite good. If we were doing this class live, I would buy a bunch and bring them in. So
Oh,
we'll have to
fine.
do this again someday when we're all live.
We'll go back to him.
Yeah.
We'll get the recipe and bake some,
There you go.
because I do scones that have with currants and
Yeah,
looks.
those are the Thyssen Bach or Welsh cake. So I'm sure you can find a recipe online for those.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna look for that.
We'll be over, Janice. because I don't cook.
Oh, I can't wait till we
Or
can
we
all
can
be
do a
with you.
drive.
Drive-by.
Yeah, drive by. Have a pickup zone. We have a circular driveway.
Uh-huh.
We have little bags on the front porch.
Yeah.
I'll go for that. You tell us when, we'll be there.
So that was a overview of Saint David. You know, so much of him is legend, just like Saint Patrick, but certainly he was historical, real person who did a lot of the things that history teaches us in terms of establishing churches and being a bishop and so forth. I mean, it's the only reason he converted so many whales and had such a following. But some of
Those were nice stories too.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
Gentle and loving. Take care
Right.
of the little things, like
Yeah.
like the bees.
right. Certainly, we can learn things from them. So Saint Columba. So I organized this talk chronologically. So moving forward a little bit to Saint Columba, who ended up having a lot of influence in Scotland and expanding Christianity up in that part of the UK.
Hmm.
And he lived from 521 to 597. Moving forward in history a little bit and becoming more reliable in our history note taking and documentation of facts. So, which is kind of nice. He was born in Donegal to a royal family. His name is from the Gaelic column, which means dove. And Columba is a Latinized version of dove, which was a nickname for him. Which friends and family gave him because he spent so much time in church as a youth. And he had a very peaceful and calm demeanor. So it became nicknamed Dove. Or Column, which became Columba. He was ordained before he was 25 and spent the next 15 years preaching and establishing churches and various foundations at Derry and Durrow and the Kells. He remained in Ireland doing his work as a priest until there was a family feud that turned into a war and claimed 3,000 lives, and his family was blamed for it, and he got exiled from Ireland.
Oh,
Oh. Hmm.
Which, you know, unfortunate for some nicknamed Dove and associated with peacefulness.
Mm-hmm.
So he took 12 of his fellow priests from one of his monasteries, and they left. And they went north and east to this island off of the coast of Scotland on the west side called Iona,
Mhm.
where he established a monastery. Actually, the monastery became very influential for Scottish Christianity in that era. So in 563, they set up a monastery on the island of Iona, which was a 30-mile by 1-mile island. And Christianity, and actually became quite the center for theological study and academic study for a couple of centuries, really until the Vikings destroyed it. And being a dove, he devoted himself to making peace between warring groups in Scotland, and also did a lot of copying of sacred manuscripts. A lot of our illuminated texts came from there. It is said that he himself hand-printed 300 copies of the gospel.
oh.
Mm.
can't imagine doing that. Nobody would be able to read mine.
My.
Hand printed. Wow.
Yeah, you know, there are no printing presses.
They don't
Yeah.
teach you to write properly being a doctor, do they, David?
And even after his death, it was a very influential area for centuries. And then,
Oh,
yeah, the legend of Nessie associated with Columba. By the way, the first reference to this is the first reference known to the Loch Ness monster was associated with Columba. The story is he came across the Loch Ness monster and made the act of the signing of the cross, and the Loch Ness monster fled from him.
Hmm.
And so the story goes back to his era, his life, around his lifetime. So Nessie's been with us for a long time. Columba was known for being a writer and a poet. And tradition says he was copying the Psalms just before his death. And this is actually a picture of the oldest Irish manuscript in existence.
Oh my gosh, look how gorgeous.
Mm.
It's a copy of the Psalms that he was supposedly handwriting. It's called the Cathach, and tradition says that's his writing there. He was copying the Psalms, and that was him. Look at even neat that is. It's like a printer. I was impressed with the calligraphy.
Absolutely.
Beautiful.
Look at that capital letter
Mm-hmm.
for curlicues and illustrations.
Beautiful.
And the form of writing is called insular majuscule script. So it's just the style of script of that Irish writing. And that's it translated.
Oh.
It's a Vulgate version of Psalms.
Oh.
Some of the writing the monks did were actually history. They actually started documenting factual events rather than just mythical and legendary versions. So the monks at Columba's monastery were early historians.
Mm.
The Venerable Bede.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly. Actually, I think he's next on my list.
Oh,
And they created a lot of illuminated manuscripts. And his abbey continued there until 849 after repeated Viking raids. And that's what shut down his monastery
Mhm.
raids. Never forget that on this day, 793 AD, a group of Vikings selflessly rescued the treasures of Lindisfarne from a great fire after the monks mysteriously and spontaneously died.
Mm. Mhm.
hmm.
doesn't look like they're rescuing it. It looks like they're taking.
I know.
Yeah.
I just throw it in for a joke.
No.
How sweet of the Vikings.
That's right. They did what they could in this situation.
Mm.
We watched that series called The Vikings on the History Channel, and they depicted the raiding of monasteries and looting of the altars. They
Did
were
they?
not gentle to the monks, though.
Oh, yeah. Imagine not. I've never seen it. Is it a good series?
It's a brutal, good series that had been very well researched, and they had done a great deal to depict the right boats and clothing and everything. And
Mhm.
so we learned a lot, and we're
Maybe brutal, if they're trying to their best to depict accurately, it would be worth watching, even though it might be brutal, and
yeah, it
it
was
gives you a picture of what really happened.
right. And they had real people from Viking history and from
Oh.
English history. So they also showed how the Vikings wanted land in England to farm, and various treaties were made that were broken. But many of the Vikings were farmers at heart, and
Right.
their own land was not as conducive, more mountainous and cold.
Right.
Yeah, if you were a younger son, you didn't get the land in your old country, so you
Yeah.
kind of went across to England to steal some from there.
Right.
You're tired of eating that lutefisk, huh?
We
Yeah.
never ate that in Minnesota. I think we took a taste.
Well, you know, I forget there are, if you go to Denmark, you get the herring, and there's something like 300 different flavors and ways that they have canned herring.
Oh my God, really?
Love the herring.
Yeah.
Pickled herring, herring and sour cream.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Haven't had that in a long time.
yeah.
Tough. We'd been to a wedding. A friend was marrying a Danish girl, and a whole bunch of us were coming back on the ferry from Denmark to England, and it was really rough weather. And there was this one older Danish lady who was sitting drinking her schnapps and smoking a foul cigar. People would go outside and, you know, be seasick, and then they'd come back in, and the first thing they saw was her sitting there puffing this big cigar,
Oh my gosh.
turn around and run out again.
Mm.
She must have been a tough old bird.
Oh, Lordy.
Yeah.
What a great story.
That's all it's gotta be.
So one of the great things about St. Columba's Monastery was their illuminated manuscripts, the artwork and detail. And there were several that came out of there. Book of Durrow, Book of Lindisfarne, and probably the Book of Kells, although there's some debate.
Mhm.
Some of the oldest poetry in the Irish language is about Columba. And some of the earliest Celtic crosses came from the Columban churches in Britain and Ireland. As well as many treasures that come from the Columban monasteries.
Mm.
Also some of the oldest narrative Latin texts outside of the Roman Empire. One of them being the Vitae Columbae, so the life of Columbus.
Mm.
Description of the Holy Land is in his, that writer's Adamon's book, De Locus Sanctus. Oldest prose narrative in Irish that we have. So a lot of significant historical stuff came from Columba's monastery, from his little island.
I'm going to go and get ready for the service, guys.
Sounds good. See you next week.
Yeah.
See you.
See you next
Bye.
week.
Yes.
Good. Nelson, good luck.
Okay, thank you much.
All right. See you later.
Toodles.
Well, at church, Ann Harris is preaching today.
Oh, really? Oh, great.
Yeah,
We'll look forward to that.
I love listening to her New Zealand accent,
Yeah.
and she is so thoughtful, lovely.
Yes. Yeah. I think I've
So
heard.
how is St. Columba generally depicted? Probably with books or scripts or something in hand?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, he's holding the book.
Book. Hmm.
Now, what is the hand gesture? Is that a blessing or?
I think it is. Yeah. I believe that the three fingers together is the Trinity, and the two fingers up is representative of the duality of Christ.
Ah,
A lot of the icons have the saints or whoever depicted holding their hands like that. Jennifer
Yeah.
went to get one, I think.
Right. I believe that's what that represents. Holy Trinity, duality of Christ. And you're right. You see a lot of saints and icons in that.
That one, that St. Columbo, this is actually St. Nicholas. Can you see his hand?
Yes.
Cool.
Mhm.
bring it up a little more.
Oh, yeah, there it
Oh,
is.
yes, yes.
Yeah, it's doing the same thing
And
as
so, yeah,
Mhm.
many of them were actually with their hands in that position.
Mhm.
Jen, is that one of your paintings?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I
it's
inspired her.
beautiful.
Let's see.
Much